Hi, this is Poetry Basics Part 2. So poetry has many different forms and can be written in many different ways. They can be short, long, fun or sad, real, imagined, structured or unstructured, and some may have rhyme, some may not. There is a lot of freedom when writing poetry, and because of this, the writer is able to express their thoughts and feelings in very unique ways. In this video, we're going to go over a few other techniques that you can use when writing your poems. Couplet poetry. A couplet is a pair of lines, and these two lines typically rhyme together. It goes back to rhyme that we talked about in video 1. They are also the same length due to the same number of syllables present. And couplets are used in poetry in order to create a rhyming flow. Think about using rhyming verse in your poems. A rhyming verse is poetry that is written in a form that rhymes throughout. An example of this could be, I hear the people sing to the glory of the king. He sits up in his great big chair to watch everybody sit and stare. Can you hear the rhyme in that? That's an example of rhymed verse. Chorus. A chorus is a part of a poem, or typically a song that is repeated after verses or stanzas. A chorus is used in a poem to create more drama. You could use an example of free verse in your poems. Free verse is poetry that avoids the patterns of rhyme and rhythm. Although it may use other repetitive patterns of words, phrases and structures, but it doesn't sound much like a poem. It seems more natural at times, and perhaps it may be a way for you to speak directly to your reader. An example of this is this. There once was a cat who sat down on the mat and stayed there till morning tea time. You can hear examples of rhyme, but it doesn't end with rhyme. That's an example of free verse. An important part of poetry, an important technique, is to make sure you try and create imagery for the reader. You can use examples found in Poetry Basics video 1, where we talk a lot about similes and metaphors. This is used to evoke feelings towards emotions, towards objects, actions, and even states of mind. Tone. Think about the tone of your poem, the general mood and atmosphere that you want to create and communicate in your poem, often by way in which something is expressed. It helps to control the response of the reader. Another technique you could use in your poetry is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is when you give human characteristics to an animal. It connects us to the animal as it's being described as something we would describe, which sometimes creates sympathy towards it. Personification, a lot like anthropomorphism. This is when you give human qualities to things that aren't real, as opposed to anthropomorphism, where you give human qualities to animals. So this connects us to the object we might be talking about, and it helps us to create sympathy for those objects or creates more depth. Oxymoron is a figure of speech that uses different or opposing terms. The most common form of oxymoron involves just two words. An oxymoron is used in poetry to create a dramatic expression and effect. Examples of these are things like living dead. You cannot be both living and dead. Pretty ugly. Or alone together. Or something like bittersweet. Ultimately, when writing your poem, it's good to think about who might be reading your poem. Think about your tone, the language you're using. Are you going to have slang in there? Do you want your poem to be warm, feel silly? Do you want it to sound reassuring? And do you want it to be polite? Think about how you might want the reader to feel. Is it something that they might relate to, or is it something you simply want to share with the reader? I hope you found this video useful. In our next video, we're going to have a look at different types of poems, and we'll see how you can apply the different techniques you've learned to those styles. Bye.